In 1901, sponge divers off the Greek island of Antikythera pulled something out of a Roman-era shipwreck that didn't fit. Buried among bronze statues and amphorae was a corroded lump of bronze and wood, roughly the size of a shoebox. It looked unremarkable. Then researchers began to pry it apart, and inside they found gears. Dozens of precisely cut, interlocking bronze gears. The ship that carried it had sunk sometime around the 1st century BC. The gears inside that box were not supposed to exist for another 1,400 years. That single object rewrote what we thought ancient Greek civilization was capable of building. Not myths about it, not legends. A physical machine recovered from the seafloor with demonstrable mechanical complexity that nothing else from that era comes close to matching. To understand why this matters, you have to understand the world it came from. Ancient Greece, in the 2nd century BC, was a civilization of extraordinary intellectual achievement. Mathematicians like Archimedes were calculating approximations of pi. Astronomers were modeling planetary motion. But our mental picture of that world has always been one of scrolls, marble, and philosophical debate. Not precision machinery, not interlocking gear trains. The historical record gave no hint that Greek craftsmen were building anything like a mechanical computer. That gap between what the textual record suggested and what the physical evidence proved is exactly where the Antikythera mechanism sits. The device is now understood to be an ancient Greek hand-powered orrery, built in the 2nd century BC. An orrery is a mechanical model of the solar system, or in this case, a device that models astronomical cycles. But calling it an orrery understates what it could do. Researchers established that it was capable of predicting astronomical positions and eclipses decades in advance. It could also track the 4-year cycle of athletic games, similar to the ancient Olympiad. That means whoever built this machine wasn't just modeling the sky for philosophical wonder. They were using it as a working calendar, a predictive instrument, and possibly a scheduling tool for the most important civic events in the Greek world. Here is where the engineering becomes difficult to explain without slowing down. A gear is a rotating machine part that transmits rotational motion through a series of teeth that engage with compatible teeth on another gear. 2 or more meshing gears form a gear train. By varying the number of teeth on each gear, you can change the ratio of rotation between them. One gear with twice as many teeth as the gear driving it will rotate at half the speed. Chain enough of those ratios together precisely, and you can model something as complex as the irregular motion of the moon across the sky. That is what the Antikythera mechanism does. It uses a physical gear train to model mathematical relationships that describe how celestial bodies move. It is, by the definition used in modern computing history, an analog computer. Not a metaphor for one. Not a precursor that sort of resembles one. The oldest known example of an analog computer. The problem researchers faced for most of the 20th century was that the device arrived in fragments. The corrosion from roughly 2,000 years underwater had fused components together and obscured the tooth counts on individual gears. Without knowing how many teeth each gear carried, you could not reconstruct the ratios, and without the ratios, you could not confirm what the machine was actually computing. Early investigators in the 1900s could see that it was sophisticated. They could not fully decode it. For decades, the mechanism sat in a state of partial understanding. Scholars knew it was remarkable. They could not yet prove the full extent of what it did. The turning point came through imaging technology. X-ray analysis, and later more advanced tomographic scanning, allowed researchers to see inside the fused fragments without destroying them. Hidden gear arrangements that had been invisible to the naked eye became readable. Tooth counts became verifiable. And as the gear train was reconstructed computationally, the astronomical functions it encoded became clear. The eclipse prediction capability was confirmed. The Olympic cycle tracking was confirmed. The device was not a curiosity or a one-off novelty. It was a functional scientific instrument built to a level of precision that matched the best astronomical knowledge of its era. What makes the Antikythera mechanism genuinely troubling to historical models is not that it exists, but that nothing like it appears again for over a millennium. The knowledge required to build it, the tradition of craftsmanship that must have supported it, the mathematical understanding it encodes, none of that disappeared because the ideas were wrong. Greek astronomy was sophisticated and largely accurate. The gear-making techniques demonstrated in this device were real and repeatable. And yet, the archaeological record shows no comparable mechanical device until the emergence of mechanical clockwork in medieval Europe. That gap is not explained by the device itself. Historians point to the disruption of the Hellenistic intellectual tradition, the destruction of centers of learning, and the gradual loss of specialized craftsmen as political and economic conditions changed across centuries. But those are broad structural explanations. They describe conditions under which knowledge can be lost. They do not tell us specifically why this particular level of mechanical sophistication left no documented descendants. That remains an open question. There is a counterpoint worth sitting with. Some researchers have noted that absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. The Antikythera mechanism survived because it was on a ship that sank in shallow enough water to be found by divers in the modern era, in a condition recoverable enough to be studied. How many similar devices were melted down for their bronze? How many sank in deep water? How many were simply never written about because their makers were craftsmen rather than philosophers? The historical record documents what was valued enough to preserve in writing. Precision instruments made by artisans were not always what scholars chose to describe. That uncertainty is honest and important. It does not license speculation about lost civilizations or advanced knowledge from outside the documented Greek world. The mechanism is consistent with everything we know about Hellenistic mathematics and astronomy. Its existence is surprising, but it is not inexplicable. What it tells us is that the ceiling of ancient technical achievement was higher than the written record alone would suggest. Today, the surviving fragments of the Antikythera mechanism are held in the National Archaeological Museum in Athens. Ongoing research continues to refine the reconstruction of its full gear train. The device remains the oldest confirmed analog computer in the archaeological record and the benchmark against which any claim about ancient mechanical sophistication has to be measured. Modern reconstructions, built using the tooth counts and gear arrangements confirmed by scanning, demonstrate that the device would have functioned as described. The astronomy it encoded was accurate. The engineering was sound. What changed in our understanding is not just the capability of one object. It is the model of what ancient craftsmen could do when mathematical knowledge and mechanical skill converged in the same hands. The Antikythera mechanism does not suggest that ancient Greeks were more advanced than history records in some vague, mystical sense. It demonstrates something more precise and more interesting, that within a specific tradition, at a specific moment, someone built a machine that solved a real computational problem using physical gears, and that machine worked. The question that remains open is not whether they could do it. We have the proof. The question is why that level of achievement did not propagate forward, and whether other examples are still waiting on the seafloor. Visual reconstructions are illustrative. Facts and interpretations are based on the sources listed in the description.